It is a horrific story that is allegedly getting worse in North Carolina.
Man, I murdered my children in my garage, man.
The dad who allegedly called 911 and admitted to killing his 4 children over multiple months has allegedly made another chilling admission. According to police, there was a 5th child who died and the dad allegedly got rid of the body. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, before we get into this case, I do want to talk about our partner and sponsor of On the Case, and it is a big one. Morgan & Morgan, America's largest personal injury law firm. They're a firm with more than 1,000 attorneys who have recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million when the insurance company offered just $350,000. Then you have in Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million, which was 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also click the link below or scan the QR code on your screen. This story has had one terrifying new detail after another, and each time you keep asking yourself, how did this allegedly go on for so long without people realizing that so many children were missing? And now we're learning that Wellington Dickens III told law enforcement reportedly that not only did he allegedly kill 3 of his own children and his stepson, but there was a 5th child that he allegedly buried in the backyard years ago. Now, before we talk about this new development, it is important to remind you of the chilling way this story came to light.
It's non-emergent, but just have a confession. Man, I murdered my children, a couple of my children, a couple of months ago. They're in my garage, man.
No matter how many times you listen to that phone call, it is chilling. That call came in on October 27th in Zebulon, North Carolina, outside of Raleigh, and it was allegedly made by Wellington Dickens III. The phone call lasted 7 minutes, that's it. When police responded to the Dickens home, they found the bodies of the 4 victims in the trunk of a car parked in his garage. Now, to this point, deputies believe that Dickens allegedly killed his 18-year-old stepson, who's been identified as Sean Brasfield. Sean was murdered, allegedly, in September 2025. Then, according to police, you have his 10-year-old son, Wellington Dickens, who was killed roughly believed to be in August or early September. 9-year-old Zoe Dickens was killed in August of this year, police believe. And then you have Leah Dickens, who was just 6 years old. She reportedly died in May of this year. Now, here is what the local sheriff said when Dickens was arrested.
Folks, there's no known motive at this point why Mr. Dickens murdered these children. But as the sheriff, as a father, and as a grandfather, I can stand here and say there's no reason for a father to murder his children.
Dickens' past certainly has its own tragedy, and it also appears he had very extreme religious beliefs that may have played a role in why all of this happened. And we see those religious beliefs in some bizarre lawsuits that he's filed over the past decade. I'll have more on that in just a moment. According to ABC 11 in Raleigh, a grand jury has indicted Dickens on charges related to the alleged murders of his children. He is charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and second-degree inherently dangerous without regard to human life. Court documents say that he willfully and feloniously and of malice aforethought killed each one of the children. Now, when police responded to Dickens' home, they say they found the 4 bodies of those children wrapped and sealed inside of a car in Dickens' garage. Inside the home, shockingly, police found Dickens' 3-year-old son alive, and he is now in state custody. And if there's good news in this story, and I know that's hard to find, it's that that boy is safe. Now, in total, that's 5 people accounted for. The 4 victims and then the 3-year-old who is now in state custody alive. But then there's this new development where Dickens allegedly has said there's another child that is unaccounted for, a 5th child. But for the 4 victims that we know about, as far as their causes of death. Here are Dickens' own words in that 911 call.
Johnston County 911, location of emergency.
Yes, I got a emergency, but not it's not emergent, but just have a confession,
Okay.
it's horrible.
Okay, what's your address?
If I could, I got my son here. He's with me. It's no issue. But if you could honestly come with no issues, I don't have no gun. I don't have nothing like that. I don't plan on doing nothing crazy. I just would like to make the scene as less profile as possible. But if you need to do what you got to do, if you want to get crazy, that's fine. But I'm just letting you know what my preference would be. I'm not an issue, but it is a problem, and just having my mind is just thinking I need to do this because it's just the right thing to do. And
okay, I got you. What's your address here? Where are you?
I'm at.
Tell me a little bit what's going on out there.
Man, I murdered my children, a couple of my children, a couple months ago. They're in my garage, man. I murdered my children, not all of them.
Okay.
I had one that I accidentally killed first by hitting her excessively.
Okay.
And I was nervous about her, and I was trying to manipulate my children and making them make a decision that I was supposed to make.
Okay. All right.
I'm no threat, man. I'll be wherever you need me to be. If you want me to be outside before, I don't got no. I'm planning on just letting myself. I never been. This is totally new for me.
Understood.
And I'm not blaming nobody but myself.
Okay. I just want to verify how many in total were there.
I have my daughter, my youngest daughter.
Okay. Just one? Is that correct?
No.
How many in total?
No. There's 3 of mine and my stepson and everybody. I mean, it was my fault. Everybody, it was my fault for everything.
Okay. So I want you to just hang tight here while I get you something help into the area, okay?
They in the trunk. They in the trunk of my car in the garage, to be specific. And I was just out of my mind. Nobody made me do nothing. It was all me. And I was just fucked up from the first one. And I lost my mind. I wasn't thinking right. I was on the drugs and I was smoking, drinking.
Yes,
I was doing ice, everything.
Got it. Okay. I want you to hold on one moment because
everything. Mushrooms. I was on a lot of stuff.
Okay. I want you to hold on one moment here since you are in a county jurisdiction.
That was all of it. I did coke.
Got it. We're going to try to get a trooper. Listen to me, okay? 1 second. We're going to try to get a trooper out there, deputy out there to you.
I might have missed something.
I understand. We're going to try to get a deputy out there to you here. I want you to hold on 1 second, okay?
I killed my children. It's a lot to explain, but in a nutshell, it's all my fault. I'm not even going. It's my fault. It's bad. I didn't hurt them on some when I say just kill, I didn't use knives or nothing to cut nobody or shoot nobody or nothing. It started out as me over disciplining. That's it. And leaving them out to eat, leaving stuff out to eat. It's a lot of stuff.
Okay, and sir, how did you do it? Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how did you do it?
I beat on them sometimes. They didn't want to eat. I didn't force them to eat. I told them that it was a punishment not to eat. I did a bunch of different little things. Thought I was trying to. It's a lot of things, and I'm trying to just do the right thing because unless something, I tried to call a lawyer earlier, but I could have maybe called a lot more lawyers. I just did one. I should have just started calling all of them, and just trying to basically turn. I was basically trying to turn myself in without it being extra. But like I said, if y'all want to do it extra, that's fine. I didn't know your procedures.
Now, we know that all the children were homeschooled, and according to ABC 11, Dickens did not properly register them with the state of North Carolina for homeschooling, so there was no oversight of them. Let's now talk about Dickens' past. A big part of it is the death of his wife that happened in 2024. Her name was Stephanie Ray Jones Dickens. She died suddenly at the home, the same home where police ended up finding those 4 bodies on April 21st, 2024. She was 37 years old, and according to her obituary, she was a God-fearing, strong woman who tried her best at all times to please God alongside her family. Now, Stephanie was 3 months pregnant at the time of her death, which authorities say was caused by complications from a miscarriage. Now, Wellington Dickens found her at home, and the family's grief over her passing did leave him as the sole caretaker for their 5 children. But again, it now appears there were 6 children in total that Dickens had with his wife. 5 of them are now dead. Authorities say that while Dickens and his late wife had extended family in the area, relatives had not publicly raised concerns about the safety of the children. Now, records that were reviewed by the newspaper, the Raleigh News and Observer, show that Wellington Dickens did have previous run-ins with the law, and he had run-ins with child welfare agencies. So there are a lot of red flags in this investigation that need to be talked about. Let's go back to 2015. Dickens was charged with misdemeanor child abuse in Raleigh. That case was later dismissed. The following year, so 2016, his daughter Zoe was born, and Wake County child welfare workers were called when hospital staff raised concerns about Zoe's health. So Dickens and his wife reportedly refused routine medical care. They repeatedly blocked social workers from seeing the child due to their religious and spiritual beliefs. Now, Dickens was arrested in 2016 for contempt of court after failing to comply with the court order to allow that child to be examined. And that led to a lawsuit. In fact, we found multiple lawsuits that Dickens filed in federal court. The lawsuit that he filed against a healthcare company is where he accuses the company of violating his religious beliefs, and this appears to be connected to the 2016 birth of his daughter, Zoe. Now, hospital staff say that Dickens and his wife left the hospital before they were properly discharged after their child's birth. Then Child Protective Services got involved. Dickens' lawsuit was dismissed, accusing the healthcare company of violating his religious beliefs. Then you have a very bizarre and disturbing lawsuit in 2017 that Dickens filed against Durham County, North Carolina, accusing the county of violating his rights related to his signing of a paternity document related to one of his kids. On page 8 of the lawsuit, Dickens accuses the county of violating his religious rights because when he signed the document, it didn't mention a statute related to child support that included the numbers 666. Dickens writes that he was, quote, negligently coerced into associating myself with the mark of the beast, labeled 666. He then marks the parts of the Bible where the numbers 666 are associated with the devil. That lawsuit was also dismissed, and both of the lawsuits do paint potentially the mindset and the beliefs of a man now accused of horrific crimes, frankly, he could be put to death over if he is found guilty. Now, for as bizarre as those lawsuits are, it's still hard to comprehend this latest development on top of everything else in this case. ABC 11 in Raleigh has newly unsealed search warrants that came out just this week alleging that Wellington Dickens told investigators that he has a 5th child who died in his care. He allegedly said that child died in May of 2023. So this would have been roughly a year before his wife died from that miscarriage. The baby's name was Riley, and Riley was just a month old when he died. It was around that time that Wellington says, just about a month into Riley's life, that the baby's health went south and the baby passed away. Dickens reportedly said that this happened shortly after his family had moved to the house in Zebulon, where the 4 bodies were found this year. But back in 2023, he allegedly says that when his 1-month-old died, he didn't call 911. He didn't seek out any sort of medical help from doctors. According to ABC 11, Dickens allegedly wrapped that baby in paper and plastic and buried the baby in the woods near his home, allegedly 4 feet deep. Now, to this point, these shocking new details are just that, allegations, they're details, but the question becomes, do they lead to new criminal charges? A big part of that has to do with the baby's body, because police say that they have not been able to find the body of that boy. Neighbors told ABC 11 that they have seen cadaver dogs in the woods near the home, perhaps searching for baby Riley, searching for new evidence to prove that claim from Wellington Dickens. New court documents also reportedly say that family members have told law enforcement that they never saw young Riley after he was born. Dickens has admitted to allegedly giving the children punishments that went too far as a reason for their murders. It's also clear that Dickens himself, he's been through tragic loss in his wife, sudden loss like the death of his wife, but still the exact reason that all of this happened allegedly is unclear. Joining us once again to talk about this case from North Carolina is Kristen Halkiotis, who is a criminal defense attorney. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. You know, each development in this case is just so difficult to comprehend, and we're now talking about a 5th child who allegedly at least died in his care, and he buries the child, he says, in the backyard. What do you make of that new development in this?
Well, Chris, thanks for having me back. I appreciate that. This new development is very odd. Certainly, at this point, authorities have not been able to find the body where he said he buried it, which at this point is an obstacle in terms of the state pursuing charges for that child.
What would they need? I mean, clearly a body would certainly help, but you have family members who know that this baby Riley was born, that the baby existed. He's not just saying the name of someone that never existed. Sure. But you don't have a body, yet no one knows where the child is. Like, what would it take for charges to be filed against Wellington Dickens compared to, for this 5th child?
So that's a great question. In criminal law, there is a principle called corpus delicti, and what that actually means, it translates to body of the crime. And so what it is designed to prevent is to prevent someone from getting convicted on a confession alone, because we know that sometimes confessions are made falsely. So there has to be some evidence that corroborates that confession that was made. So, certainly if they find a body, that's a game changer in terms of charging him for that child's death as well. But also if there's other evidence, if there were other witnesses, if there was evidence they found on a cell phone, for example, there are different ways you can find evidence in that respect, because we know that certainly people can be prosecuted for murder in cases where bodies are never found, but there does have to be some evidence that there was a murder and that they were the person who in fact committed it, other than just the confession.
This baby allegedly died in May of 2023 when he was just 1 month old. Is there a crime or a charge that he could face for the fact that there was this baby and the baby's now gone and nobody knows where the child is?
Again, they're going to need some sort of evidence that the child was in fact murdered, that other than just him saying that's what happened.
And when it comes to this case as a whole, because, and I know we've talked about this in the past, he's facing, brutal, brutal accusations and charges. He's been indicted by a grand jury. North Carolina is a state where he could be put to death over it. What would it take for him not to receive a death penalty based off everything we've heard at this point?
So, you know, again, we talked about this, I think, last time a little bit too. I'm sure that his defense attorneys at this point, as they start their investigation, they are working on compiling and finding out whatever mitigating evidence they have, evidence that would mitigate in a penalty phase and allow them to make a good case to a jury for a sentence of life without possibility of parole instead of the death penalty. And so I think that's where, you know, if any evidence, likely it's going to be some sort of mental health. You know, certainly the longer the interval of time during which these crimes were committed tends to reduce the ability in general for someone to say that they were insane at the time it happened. But there's still, even if you don't have the defense of insanity, there can still be diminished capacity, and there still can be mitigation related to that, which can be presented in a penalty phase to allow a jury to sentence someone to life, again, in lieu of the death penalty.
And I know we talked about, another one that we talked about last time I found interesting is in North Carolina, for someone to be on a jury in a case that could be a death penalty case, like what are the qualifications that they have to meet to be able to sit on that jury?
Yeah, this is for any state that has the death penalty, and a person has to be able to be death qualified, which means that they have to be able to say that, yes, there are certain situations in which I could vote for death. So if someone at jury selection is saying, you know, I am morally opposed to the capital punishment, I could never vote death no matter how heinous the crime was, then that person will be excused and they will not be permitted to serve because, again, everyone who's serving on a capital jury has to be death qualified.
How does that impact the pool beyond just the death penalty? Because there's a lot of people who would be against the death penalty, but still could be very good jurors on a lot of other aspects of a case like this.
Sure. So for any case, though, that is declared capital, every person sitting on that jury is going to have to be death qualified. There's no way around that. And so certainly what the attorneys are going to be looking for, they're going to be looking for those life givers on a jury, the people who perhaps might not be so adamantly wedded to the concept of the death penalty, who might say, well, you know, in some cases, I could potentially give the death penalty so they get death qualified, right? But then they might be less likely to actually vote for it and more likely to vote for life without possibility of parole, which would be their other option in a penalty phase.
Often in cases, I think the word insane is something that like kind of socially people would use and might, just based off the accusations on the outside, not in a criminal proceeding, you would say that a man like Wellington Dickens is insane because of what he allegedly committed. What does the bar have to be inside the courtroom for him to be considered insane and to be able to use that as a defense?
So yes, that's a great question. Insanity is a term of art, and it has a very specific legal definition. And what it means is that at the time of the commission of the crime, the defendant was unable, had some sort of condition that prevented him from being able to appreciate his actions, to understand the difference between right and wrong. And so it's a pretty high bar for an insanity defense. Not so much for diminished capacity. It's not as high of a bar for that in terms of mitigation once they get past a guilt-innocence phase and move on to a penalty phase of a capital trial.
I'm sure there are a lot of questions for elected leaders in North Carolina as this case is played out, but it's even now when we're talking about a fifth child going back to 2023, and then you have these four other people, including a stepson who's 18 years old. There's just that question of how could this happen? Like, how is it that so many kids can go missing and no one seemed to know until allegedly Wellington Dickens calls 911? And I know you're a criminal defense attorney, but I feel like when you look at this story, you're just kind of like, how does this happen?
Well, and Chris, I'll tell you how it happens. I think I come from this also from the angle as someone who's a former child abuse prosecutor. And I think if you ask any child abuse prosecutor, not unique to that county or this state, but anywhere, when you have children who are being homeschooled, whether or not the homeschooling is actually legitimate, because in this case it would appear that perhaps it was not really legitimate homeschooling that was going on, it's just what he was telling people. But anytime those children are not at a regular school every day, to have eyes on them, to have somebody, actually looking at them, seeing that they're okay, kids can fall through the cracks. And some of the worst child abuse cases I saw as a prosecutor were actually, and especially neglect, were children who fell through the cracks because they were homeschooled. That's what their parents had been telling the school system. And so there was no teacher every day to see them, right? There were no peers every day to see them, or parents of friends, things like that. The normal interactions, regular interactions that we would think that children would have at school every day, those are gone. So all those eyes on kids are gone, and it just creates a perfect storm when you have a parent who's perpetrating some kind of abuse or neglect on a child. It really creates a perfect storm for something like this to happen.
Because, and as a former prosecutor, when it comes to these types of cases, I think of the house where it all took place too. Like, this is not a home that was like off the beaten path in a way. I mean, this is a place where neighbors are, like, just the quotes from them in the local news stories where they've lived next to this home for years and they had no idea that any of this was going on. Like, in those types of cases, can you just speak to how it can happen almost in plain sight, but in a place, I mean, this is a suburban neighborhood outside of Raleigh. This is not a rural part of North Carolina where all this took place.
You just never know what's going on behind closed doors in people's houses. You just don't know. And I feel like that's a theme that gets repeated all the time in cases that I've seen as both a prosecutor and as a defense attorney. You just don't know what is going on in people's homes. When you think about, how common domestic violence is in our society too,
Yeah.
a lot of people will just be completely shocked to find out that someone they know has been dealing with issues like that for a long time because, again, we just don't know what's going on in other people's homes. And there really is no way of knowing. If somebody doesn't want that information out and doesn't want it shared, they're able to hide it.
Yeah, and it's just to see it in this case with the accusations, and they're just accusations at this point. I mean, it's just so chilling. When it comes to a prosecutor's decision now, where you may have this fifth child, and you're trying to figure out, and I know 2023 was a long time ago to try and find evidence where you could charge him. Do you hold off? Does a prosecutor hold off on moving forward with this case until law enforcement can maybe find evidence to add on to that charge? Or with how strong the evidence seems to be against Wellington Dickens, you continue on, and then if police can call and say, hey, we were able to find this body, that can lead to more charges in this case?
I think exactly that second scenario. I think you hold off on that charge. You let law enforcement run their investigation. You know where the defendant is. He's in custody. He's not going anywhere. So you don't have to worry about that. So you let law enforcement do their investigation. I would assume they're going to continue to really dig up that property and see if they can find any bit of human remains to test to corroborate the defendant's confession. And then if that were to materialize, I would anticipate that the prosecutors would talk to law enforcement. They would figure out what can then be substantiated in terms of charges, and that then they would charge him at that point.
And how long would you expect from now until there could be a conviction if he was to take this all the way to the trial, go through the penalty phase? Just with how cases typically work in North Carolina, what's the timeline that we'd be looking at?
Most likely a couple of years, and remember, he's going to have to be, I'm sure at this point, mechanisms are already in place for getting him evaluated, for having psychiatrists talk to him. And those are all normal things that have to happen, right? Everybody in our country is guaranteed due process in the legal system. And so I'm sure those mechanisms are already at work right now. in terms of the things that his defense team are working on. But again, it sounds like there's a lot with this investigation that's still going. So it sounds like the prosecution probably isn't ready to get into anything at this point either just yet, because they're still investigating. It sounds like we're getting a lot of information that continues to trickle out in this case. And who knows, that may continue.
Yeah, and it just seems like each time it comes out, it just gets worse and worse. We'll see how this story continues to play out. Kristen Halkiotis from North Carolina, a criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. As always, we appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.